A suspected terror attack in Judea and Samaria as a young man in his 20s remains in critical condition, suffering a head wound after being run down by a Palestinian driver. Security forces on the scene neutralized the attacker, and the IDF says the details are currently under investigation. And moving on, despite the talks and speculation of an end to the war ahead of the White House meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the IDF continues to gain ground in Gaza. It's day 723 of the war, and Defense Minister Israel Katz says that the IDF is moving into a phase aimed at achieving full dominance over Hamas. Defense Minister Israel Katz said that more than 750,000 Palestinians have now evacuated Gaza City for humanitarian zones in the south of the Strip. An estimated 200,000 Gazans still remain in the city, defying IDF evacuation directives aimed at protecting civilians. As such, the IDF has issued renewed evacuation orders for the remaining residents of Gaza City, part of its ongoing efforts to protect civilians ahead of intensified ground operations against Hamas. Katz said the IDF is now moving into a phase aimed at achieving full dominance over the terror organization. He reiterated that if Hamas does not release all hostages and disarm, Gaza will be destroyed and Hamas will be annihilated. Katz added that Israel will not stop until achieving all the war's objectives. Meanwhile, over the course of the past 24 hours, the Air Force struck approximately 140 terrorist targets throughout the Gaza Strip. The IDF and Shin Bet also announced that they have eliminated Hamas terrorist Mohammed Ahmad Yusuf al-Jamal. Al-Jamal was the Hamas terrorist responsible for shooting elite Yamam commando Arnon Zamora in June of 2024 during what has been now dubbed Operation Arnon. The mission that rescued 4 hostages, Noah Argamani, Almog Meir Jan, Andrei Kozlov, and Shlomo Ziv, that were held in central Gaza. Al-Jamal was the Hamas terrorist responsible for guarding the hostages. Alongside Al-Jamal, the IAF strike also killed Sari Idris Muhammad al-Akrab, a Hamas terrorist who invaded Israel during the October 7th massacre and was considered close to Al-Jamal. And the details of U.S. President Trump's 21-point plan to end the war and release all the hostages has been revealed. ILTV's Kalev Ben-David, host of Security Brief, joins us now with all the details. Kalev, so last week you were in the studio talking to us about what we knew so far, but now the full plan has been revealed. What can you tell us? Well,
listen, there are some points that are, I think, good for Israel and useful for Prime Minister Netanyahu, but others that are going to be quite problematic for him. For example, we have a more sense of some of the timelines of things. For example, we know that all 48 hostages are going to be released in one shot. That was the intention of the plan. Now apparently in one of the points, within 48 hours of Israel publicly accepting the deal, all living and deceased hostages will be returned. So there's a definite timeline within 48 hours of Israel publicly accepting the deal, and that's good news. However, there are some other issues that are more problematic. For example, Prime Minister Netanyahu has made clear that he does not want to see the Palestinian Authority involved in any way. And one of the points mentioned specifically that the Palestinian Authority, after it goes a period of reform, will be involved in the governance of the Gaza Strip. The problem is it doesn't really specify what that reform is, what that timeline is, and just the mention of the Palestinian Authority there is going to be problematic for the Prime Minister. Even more problematic is for the Prime Minister is the fact that it talks about renewing a peace process, basically, and it says the conditions may be in place for the talks will involve a credible pathway to Palestinian statehood, which is recognized by the aspiration of the Palestinian people. Again, Prime Minister Netanyahu, in his UN speech just the other day, said made an outright rejection of Palestinian statehood, and this plan has a specific mention of Palestinian statehood as at least an eventual goal. With this also problematic, and that maybe the point people should really focus on that could be the most is a point that says if Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above points will proceed in terror-free areas which the IDF will gradually hold over to the International Mobilization Force of Arab and Muslim states. Basically, that's saying even if Hamas rejects the deal now, it should proceed forward in at least those areas which the IDF has basically fully taken over. So it doesn't give an out for Prime Minister Netanyahu to say, well, we can't move forward on this because Hamas rejects it.
So very interesting new information coming to light. Of course, we'll have to wait until the meeting between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump at the White House tomorrow. But it certainly seems like there's going to be quite a few red lines for Israel with this plan.
Absolutely. And we're just going to see from their comments how much latitude, at least on time-wise, President Trump is willing to give to Prime Minister Netanyahu.
All right, Kalev, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
And the much-anticipated meeting between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Trump is set to take place tomorrow. Could it signal the end of the war? Joining us now for a special panel to discuss is Dr. Einat Will, former member of Knesset and co-author of The War of Return, and Ori Sachal, Director of Research at the Israel Defense and Securities Forum. Thank you both for joining us today. So, Einat, let's start with you. Going into this meeting, are the two leaders still on the same page when it comes to Gaza and the day after? Because from what we know, it sounds as though Trump will call on Israel to make some serious concessions. I mean, are there any red lines for Netanyahu?
First of all, I must admit that I'm less concerned by whether they are on the same page and more about whether anyone has asked Hamas about all of this, because one pattern that we know is typical in the last few decades is that America negotiates with Israel only to later find out that the Palestinians are missing in action, that they're nowhere to be found, and that there will be no forthcoming yes. This was the case with the previous Trump peace plan, which ultimately yielded the Abraham Accords, but to which Israel said yes, and the Palestinians, true to their ethos, said no, no, and 1,000 times no. So, for example, the idea that all 48 hostages will be released immediately, and only then everything else starts, is that even acceptable? And if Hamas doesn't say yes to that, then what about all the other beautiful words and everything else? So I think Israel and the U.S. can be negotiating and maybe have some differences and ultimately achieve some agreement. But the question whether all of this is at all relevant to what Hamas might say yes to.
And turning to you, from a security standpoint, has Israel achieved what it needed to in Gaza in terms of dismantling Hamas's terror infrastructure? Can it end the war tomorrow and still be satisfied that Hamas will not reemerge?
So I will say that the war can end tomorrow if Hamas lays down its arms and release all the hostages. And this is a demand that Israel said from day one. Unfortunately, there are some people around the world who think that Israel is some sort of a crusade to commit genocide against innocent Palestinians. Well, in fact, with the only thing that Israel has in mind, the security of its soldiers, of its citizens, and to end the war as quickly as possible with Hamas disarmed and the hostages released. And as Einat said, Hamas has not responded positively to any sort of even very generous demands, like the president said. President Trump said they were offered several generous demands. Israel already accepted several of Witkoff's proposals, and Hamas stuck to its refusal. Since January, there were no successful hostage negotiations. So the question is, how long can Israel tolerate this? And I determine here on a security standpoint that no, Israel cannot just lay down its arms and go back to Gaza's borders, because Hamas is still there, and it suffered a hard blow. But tomorrow, in a year, in two, it can definitely instigate another October 7 attack. And Israel will not be safe knowing that Hamas is still there. And the international community, on its part, should not go out of its way to empower the very jihadists they seek to appease in the suburbs of Paris and London. They should be listening to Israel, the experience of people who are on the ground suffering the consequences of these steps on the world stage, and insist that Hamas disarms and releases all the hostages.
And Einat, back to you. Trump's plan has been revealed. And as we just heard, one of the points stipulates that the plan will go forward even if Hamas says no, that it will go forward in areas that Israel is already in control of the Gaza Strip, which is the majority of the Gaza Strip. So what do you make of this? And what does Netanyahu hope to gain out of this meeting with Trump, or are his hands already tied?
So the point about Hamas saying no says that in areas that are essentially cleared from Hamas and cleared from terrorist activity, then the activities that have to do with building and construction can proceed. But again, this is not related. If Hamas doesn't say yes to releasing all 48 hostages immediately, I mean, the plan talks about within the first 48 hours, then everything else becomes moot. And at least to date, Hamas made it clear that it will release the last hostage to the extent that it knows where all the bodies are buried, that it will release the last hostage only when basically everything is already working and reconstruction has happened. This plan basically says, no, this has to happen in the beginning and then everything else. So it's not even clear that we have a yes for that before we talk about everything else. The point about Hamas not having to agree talks about all the other stuff, about having an alternative government and about de-radicalization and all that. And it talks about allowing construction to proceed and about allowing Israeli withdrawal to proceed in areas where there is no more Hamas and allowing alternative security forces to go in. But I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on the point where I haven't in the last 2 years heard anything from Hamas that will lead me to believe that they will agree to a deal in which all 48 hostages, dead and alive, are released, and only then everything else proceeds.
And I want to turn to you now and ask sort of how Qatar fits into all of this. Israel is seeing Trump cozying up to Qatar. Netanyahu can't be too happy about that and the role that Qatar is playing in putting together this plan.
Look, it's true, and Israel is not particularly happy about the way the United States sees Qatar, but that's probably okay because the United States has its own interests and they don't necessarily 100% align with Israel's interests. But I will say it was kind of amusing to see the pilgrimage over of all these Arab leaders to Doha, pulling no punches and each going out of their way to really stand next to Qatar and stand by its side, the very country that they imposed embargo on just a few years before. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the rest of the Arab world strongly condemning Qatar for its ties to terrorism. And now they all sort of rally around the flag, and when they come back to their capitals, in Riyadh and in Cairo, they call Jerusalem because they know that Israel is the gateway to Washington. So I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about Qatar. The only thing that I want to see is Qatar extradite all heads of Hamas to Israel or to the United States immediately. There is absolutely no justification to harbor terrorists. When the U.S. raided Pakistan to catch bin Laden, everyone was praising it. Now Israel is doing the same thing with Hamas in Qatar, and there's an outrage and an outcry. So I would not take it way too seriously. I would just say that Qatar cannot continue harboring terrorists and complaining about Israel violating its own sovereignty. Well, Qatar has been violating Israel's sovereignty for years now with harboring Hamas terrorists, and I might say the Western Europe and the United States sovereignty, pouring billions of dollars to universities, academia, and popular culture. So, that's just a matter of perspective, how we see it, and I think in the end, we can conclude a deal even without Qatar involved.
Mm-hmm. All right, so it's going to be an interesting 24 hours until we see the outcome of the meeting between Netanyahu and Trump. Dr. Einat Wilf Or Issachar, thank you so much for joining us and for your analysis today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And over the weekend, Hamas terror official Ghazi Hamad was interviewed by a CNN reporter. Hamad, who survived the Israeli strikes in Doha, Qatar, said that Hamas had no regrets regarding the October 7th massacre, despite its consequences in the Gaza Strip. ILTV's Deborah Klein has the story.
Sitting in an undisclosed location in Doha, Qatar, just 2 weeks after Israeli fighter jets targeted Hamas officials in the Qatari capital, Hamas official Ghazi Hamad sat down with a CNN correspondent. The Hamas official was pressed hard with questions by the reporter. When asked if Hamas bears any responsibility for the casualties in the Gaza Strip and for the October 7th massacre, Hamad said this.
Look, you know what is the benefit of October 7 now? Now, when the award now, if you look to the General Assembly yesterday, when about 194 people opened their eyes and looked to the atrocity, to brutality of Israel, and all of them, they condemned Israel.
After praising the international community for rewarding Hamas's terrorism, CNN reporter Jeremy Diamond tried showing Hamad clips of Gazans asking Hamas to disarm. He refused to watch them. But when asked if Hamas was willing to disarm in favor of a Palestinian state, Hamad denied Gazan frustration with Hamas.
If there is a Palestinian state, we'll be part. We will be engaged. We will be
the entire
integrated.
world, with all due respect, sir, the entire world is saying they want no role for Hamas in post-war governance of Gaza.
Look.
Do you disagree with that?
We agree. Yeah, no. We agree for and you are committed to rule Gaza. We have no problem.
Right. So, and as part of that, Hamas will play no part, according to the Arab League, according to President Abbas, according to the United States, according to France.
Let me also to explain that this is a Palestinian issue. That some external powers, they want to impose something against our interest. Hamas is part of the Palestinian fabric. You could not exclude Hamas. But
amidst the stuttering and incohesive arguments, the Hamas officials' positions were clear. Hamas refuses to disarm, refuses to accept any ceasefire presented by the United States, refuses to accept responsibility for the Gazan casualties, and welcomes another October 7th style attack against Israel.
And on October 16th, ILTV News and the Jewish Agency for Israel will mark 2 years since the October 7th massacre with a powerful 90-minute broadcast. This special event will share survivor testimonies, stories of resilience, and the unity of Jewish communities worldwide. Join us as we honor the victims, support the families, and stand together for Israel's future. Scan the QR code now to sign up and be part of this meaningful program. And in other news, Hezbollah marked 1 year to the death of its former leader, Hassan Nasrallah. The IDF marked the occasion, too, releasing new details of Nasrallah's final days and of the operation that took him out.
Thousands gathered in Hezbollah strongholds in the suburbs of Beirut Saturday to mark the 1-year anniversary of the killing of the terror group's former leader, Hassan Nasrallah, by Israel. Hezbollah's new Secretary General Naim Qassem, who took over a month after Nasrallah's killing, delivered a speech reaffirming Hezbollah's commitment to try and eradicate the state of Israel.
نزع السلاح يعني نزع القوة تلبية لمطلب إسرائيل ولتحقيق أهدافها. ثالثا لن نسمح بنزع السلاح وسنواجه مواجهة كربلائية لأننا في معركة وجودية.
Since October 8th, when Hezbollah declared war on Israel and subsequently fired thousands of missiles into Israeli territory, the Iranian-backed terror proxy has suffered numerous blows, from the pager operation to Nasrallah's death to the toppling of an ally in Bashar al-Assad in Syria. The group is weak, fractured, and even facing opposition from within Lebanon. And it wasn't just Hezbollah that marked the anniversary. The IDF also released never-before-seen footage and details of Nasrallah's final days. The IDF Intelligence Directorate revealed on Saturday that Nasrallah was killed in an Israeli airstrike while spending his final days in a bunker built with Iranian technology, planning to rebuild the terror group's capabilities and counterattack Israel after the infamous pager operation. And the Hezbollah chief, who spearheaded the terror group for 30 years, never saw it coming. He was reportedly unaware that he was Israel's next target. Every day, Efrat gives women facing unplanned pregnancies the courage and support to choose life. From cribs and strollers to food, diapers, and daycare, Efrat ensures babies are not only born, but thrive in loving homes. For more than 40 years, nearly 90,000 women have chosen motherhood with Efrat by their side. Your gift today means one more woman has a real choice. One more baby has a future. Donate now.
And the United Nations has officially reinstated snapback sanctions on the Islamic Republic of Iran, following failed efforts by Tehran to try and delay the measures. All the details in the following report. The UK, France, and Germany, known as the E3, triggered the return of snapback sanctions at the UN Security Council, a decade after they were suspended as part of accusations that Tehran violated the 2015 JCPOA nuclear deal that aimed it to stop developing nuclear weapons. The UN sanctions went into effect Saturday evening after attempts to resume negotiations and delay the sanctions failed on the sidelines of the annual UN General Assembly. The foreign ministers of the E3 released a statement saying, "We urge Iran and all states to abide fully by these resolutions." The ministers, however, did leave a door open for continued talks. The E3 ministers said they had no choice but to trigger sanctions after Tehran repeatedly breached its commitments. In response, Tehran recalled its ambassadors to London, Paris, and Berlin. The UN sanctions, which were officially introduced between 2006 and 2010, include an arms embargo, bans on enriching uranium, bans on technology for ballistic missile capabilities, sanctions on Iran's financial system and oil sector, as well as travel bans. Russia and China, who have allied themselves with the Islamic Republic and put forth the failed resolution to delay sanctions for another 6 months, have decried the measures as illegal. They will likely not comply with the sanctions. For its part, the Islamic Republic of Iran downplayed the sanctions, with Iran's president Masoud Pezeshkian saying it's not like the sky is falling. Speaking at the UN following the decision, Iran's foreign minister threatened the Western countries.
The E3 and the United States bear full responsibility for the serious consequences of today's decision. By ignoring facts, spreading false claims, misrepresenting Iran's peaceful program, and blocking diplomacy, they have actively and intently paved the way for dangerous escalation.
Meanwhile, following the snapback sanctions, Israel remains on high alert over fears the decision could prompt Tehran to accelerate its nuclear weapons program, which was severely hampered following Operation Rising Lion. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 22 degrees Celsius or 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside steady temperatures with highs of 32 degrees Celsius or 89 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and our new live channel. And you can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Madar Gravelazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.